From Nazis to kings to U.S. presidents, some of history's biggest names have traveled by secret routes that most people aren't aware of. They're known as the hidden rails. And now we're going to take you on a tour of them. Welcome back, everyone. It's me, and this is my channel. From the Berlin Underground to a hidden passage in the U.S. White House, Hitler had taken power in 1933 after the Great Depression and quickly started building up his army. The country's economy was in sharp decline and people were struggling to make ends meet. When World War II broke out, King George VI of England found himself in a difficult position. As the leader of the British Empire, he was responsible for protecting his people from the Nazis. But he was also the father of two young children who he didn't want to lose. In order to keep his children safe, he devised a plan to evacuate them from London to the countryside. But he didn't want the Nazis to know about this plan. He couldn't risk them targeting his children if they found out, so he kept it a secret and moved his children to safety without telling anyone. The king's daughter, Princess Elizabeth, later revealed that she and her sister had been evacuated to the countryside during the war. She said that they were sent away in order to keep them safe from the bombs being dropped by the Nazis. The king's son, Prince Charles, was also evacuated, but he was sent to live with relatives in Scotland. The king's wife, Queen Elizabeth, stayed in London throughout the war, and she famously refused to leave the city despite the danger. The royal family's actions during the war were kept secret for many years, and it wasn't until much later that the public learned about the evacuation of the king's children. However, this was only part of the story. The truth was that King George VI had a secret railway line built in order to transport his children to safety. The railway line was built on the grounds of Windsor Castle, and it was designed to be used in the event of a Nazi invasion. The king's children would have boarded the train at Windsor Castle and traveled to safety in the countryside. The railway line was kept secret in order to protect the king's children, and it was never used. But it was an important part of the king's plan to keep his family safe during the war. You've probably spent hours reading about Harry and his friends as they attend Hogwarts and learn about the magical world. But what if I told you that there was a real-life version of Hogwarts? Well, believe it or not, there is. And it's called the Bureau of Land Management. The BLM is a federal agency responsible for managing and conserving public lands in the United States. They oversee over 247 million acres of land, which is about the size of Montana. But here's where things get interesting. The BLM also manages a number of cultural and historic properties, including ghost towns, abandoned mining camps, and even a former prison. These sites are open to the public, which means that you can visit them and experience history firsthand. For example, you can explore the ghost town of Rhyolite, Nevada, which was once a booming mining town but is now a deserted wasteland. Or you can check out the abandoned Alcatraz prison, which housed some of America's most notorious criminals. In an effort to stabilize the country, Russian leaders turned to the black market in order to obtain goods that were in short supply. They worked with organized crime groups to purchase food, clothing, and other essential items that could then be distributed throughout the population. This may sound like an unusual move for a government to make, but it was actually a common practice during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russian leaders were desperate to keep the population fed and clothed, and they were willing to turn to the black market in order to do so. The problem was that these black market goods were often of poor quality and sometimes even dangerous. But the Russian government was willing to accept the risks in order to help stabilize the country. The situation became so dire that the Russian government even began printing rubles with images of McDonald's food on them in order to obtain meals for those in need. While this may seem like an extreme measure, it was actually a common practice during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russian leaders were desperate to feed their population, and they were willing to do whatever it took to make sure that people had something to eat. Before long, he had invaded Poland and France, and people were starting to look for ways to escape the Nazis. One of the most famous stories of escape came from June 1944 when D-Day took place and Allied forces began to fight against the Germans. Over the next few years, there was a race against time as soldiers tried to flee the advancing Allies. Hitler ordered all trains carrying important people or items needed for the war effort to be fitted with special devices that would explode if the train was derailed. This order came after several assassination attempts on Hitler's life, including a failed attempt by Georg Elser, who planted a bomb under a speaker that was meant to be used by Hitler during a political rally in 1939. So anyone trying to flee Nazi Germany knew that they needed to take extreme measures in order to avoid detection. Many soldiers attempted to escape by hiding in freight cars filled with food, animals, or other items that wouldn't draw attention to themselves. However, they risked being spotted and sent to prison camps if caught. Some soldiers built secret compartments in luggage, coffins, or even inside the bodies of dead horses. Others fled on foot or by bicycle, avoiding roads and sticking to wooded areas. And still others made their way to neighboring countries, hoping to find refuge there. But no matter what method they used, every German soldier knew that they had to stay hidden at all times in order to survive. And the secret railway line built for King George VI, these are the top 5 hidden rails that you need to know about. Number 5. The White House. The President of the United States has one of the most powerful positions on Earth. With the country's leader at the helm, it is their job to make decisions that affect not just the people living within the borders of the USA, but other countries around the world. When someone is elected president, they need to get to the White House quickly so they can begin their new role. But how do they do it? Well, it's not via the front door. In fact, the first thing that any newly elected president needs to do is enter the White House through the underground tunnel located near the West Wing. This tunnel was built during the construction of the White House when plans were drawn up by James Hoban, who based his plans for the layout of the mansion on Leinster House in Dublin. He wanted the president to be able to travel between the two buildings without having to worry about the weather or getting stuck in traffic. As such, there are 3 separate tunnels leading from the mansion to the White House that each measure approximately 100 feet in length. Only 4 people are allowed in the tunnel at any one time, with the president being accompanied by 2 military officers and 1 valet. All of the officers are sworn to secrecy and must keep everything they see while traveling in the tunnels under lock and key. No photos are allowed to be taken, and no one is permitted to talk about their experiences until they leave office. Now, the tunnel isn't only used by the sitting president. Former presidents also use the passageway to travel between the 2 buildings whenever they visit. Number 4. Nazi Germany. During World War II, Nazi Germany took over much of Europe, causing devastation in its wake. Number 3. Soviet Union. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Russia found itself in a state of chaos. Number 2. Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series is one of the most popular book series of all time. Number 1. King George. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite historical secret? Let us know in the comments below.